Hey everyone, welcome back to the arena. I'm MD, joined here by Matt, and once again, an awesome special guest that we can't wait to have a conversation with. Before we get into it, love and support to those that continue to follow and show love and support to us.
What's up? What's up, guys? I just realized I need a better introduction. I can't just keep saying "What's up, guys? How's it going?" Like I've got another special guest. I need to work on that. Anyway, we have a great guest here who I'm very excited to introduce. Her name is Melissa Crouch. Um, she is the podcast host of Girl You're Glowing, and she is also a mother, and I would say entrepreneur, but I will let Melissa kind of further introduce herself. So, Melissa, why don't you share who is Melissa Crouch and kind of your story and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief, just on like who I am, a little intro. But my name's Melissa. I'm 30 years old. I'm a mom, like you mentioned. I grew up my whole life in the desert, so like Joshua Tree area. I got pregnant really young at 18. I was a senior in high school, and so I've been a single slash solo parent because I do think that there is a difference between the two. It's just been us two, and yeah, for the last 10 years, and I have gotten my master's degree at San Diego State University in communication studies. I taught for a little bit over there around the San Diego area. I've done like marketing and finally, eventually decided like, fuck it. Can I cuss on here?
Oh yeah, you already did. No, I'm kidding. It's totally fine.
I was just like, fuck it. Like I'm ready to like work for myself and like, I think that entrepreneur side just kind of came out over the last couple years and decided I wanted to do a podcast and do social media full time. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. And we live here in San Diego as well.
So, what do we need to know about Melissa's childhood to kind of better understand who you are today?
Oh wow. Really like vague question. I feel like there's so much. Well, I guess I'll start here. I'm a child. I had two siblings, a brother and a sister, and I'm the youngest. And as I'd mentioned, like I grew up in the desert, kind of the middle of nowhere, and that was definitely like a really interesting experience of its own because I think that you are just like forced to use your imagination. And I mean, like literally, I had no neighbors, we had no internet, we had nothing, and so I actually think that that was like pretty great to grow up with. But unfortunately, my parents, they fought a lot. There was like a lot of domestic violence in my home. I don't think I ever saw my family like happy together. My parents, I don't think I ever saw them kiss like once. It was just like constant like violence and fighting. And so that was really hard on me as a child. And I think a lot of that stemmed from like my father was an alcoholic. And he actually didn't sober up until I don't know, the last like 7 years of his life. And at that point, I was like almost a junior in high school. So I went my whole childhood without really having like an emotionally present father. I mean, he was physically there, but like the damage of him physically being there was pretty rough. So yeah, I don't know. I guess you could say I probably have like daddy issues in that way where I just never really felt like close or connected with my dad. I did love him, obviously. Well, not obviously. I guess some people like resent their parents, you know. I've definitely like grown to have empathy for him and like understand his life more. But yeah, so I mean, there was a lot of that, and then just like growing up in the desert, I think had its own challenges of just there wasn't a lot going on. There was just like drinking and partying and drugs, and I think a lot of my friends got into that earlier than they probably should have, and same with me. And so yeah, that kind of stuff like makes you grow up a little bit faster.
And now you have a podcast called Girl You're Glowing. Is there, I mean, that's really helpful background context, by the way, and appreciate the vulnerability to share that. You know, explain a little bit of background around what the podcast covers, the mission behind it, and is there a dot? Are there dots to connect there in terms of like a transformation, or are you trying to help people kind of move through some of those healing processes that you've obviously had to work through yourself?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I have, I've experienced a lot of loss in my life. My dad has, at this point, he's been gone for 7 years. My son's father commit suicide. I've lost friends. So, like, I am a huge advocate for mental health, and it's not just from like experiencing loss. I think it's just going through trauma at such like a young age, and I have absolutely dealt with, depression and anxiety, especially depression, like from, being a young child up until now. And I want to help people, understand that they're not alone. And like you can look at someone and think that they have the perfect life or think they have it all together. And they're actually struggling, and so, yeah, I've just always really cared about mental health. So I talk a lot about that on the podcast. I also like to talk about just being a single solo parent because I feel like that's like the number one, question I get from everyone is like, how do you do it? Like, I'm struggling so hard. So I think for me, that's where like my passion for self-love and self-care kind of stemmed, was just like I felt like I was completely lacking that, and I've had to work really hard to find ways to like love myself in the moments where I didn't think that I could. And so my podcast is just to like be open, start conversations about mental health, talk about like single parenting, like stigmas in that, and like how hard it can be, especially when you're like single too, when you're trying to date. It's so hard. Um, so yeah, I mean that's really what it's about, like mental health, just like empowering people to, I don't know, feel like they're not alone.
Yeah, no, that's very powerful. And I want to ask you, you said you've had to work, and you emphasize really hard in order to love yourself and self-love. So like what does that work look like?
That's such a tough question because I feel like for everyone it looks differently. Like for me, I think I grew up feeling like I wasn't worthy. And I think a lot of that stemmed from my father was like physically present, but not emotionally present. And, my mom was so busy working at like Ralph's grocery store trying to support a family of 5 people that like love her, but like I don't feel like I got emotional presence from her either. Not even really like physical. Like she wasn't really like, she didn't like show affection to me. And so I think I just grew up like seeking, like trying to just find people to like love me. Like I just needed validation that I was worthy or good enough. Um, and I think part of it is a perception shift, like going through experiences and realizing for me that like I am my home and I am my own family, and like I do have the ability to like to change that, especially as a parent. Like it's crazy when you're parenting your child and you're like, wow, like I get to do things differently. Like I get to show my child what it should be like or should feel like, to have a parent. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Like I'm trying to think if I have any like tactical tips. I mean, I think like creating time for yourself is so important. Doing the work and as I mentioned, like figuring out what it is that you struggle with and like really working on that. And I think sometimes the first thing that someone could do to figure that out is just go to therapy and like talk to someone about it, someone who's like unbiased and can help you sort through things, because our emotions get so messy and I think sometimes we just get so tangled in them. Like I remember going through one of the hardest times of my life. One time, I had been with my boyfriend for 3 years and my dad had died. And then like a month later, my boyfriend cheated on me. And I just remember this like year after my dad died and after breaking up with my partner who had cheated on me, I just remember being in so much physical pain, like all over my body every day. I didn't even know what I was hurting about. Like I just woke up every day just in so much pain, and it was like I had to do the work. I had to go to a therapist to like have her help me sort through those feelings and emotions and like understand like what I really needed to focus on. It's like going to the gym, every day you're like working to figure it out and like have a healthier mind.
I absolutely love everything you just said. I mean, you just summarized kind of like what we're trying to promote on this show. Um, and just by sharing your experience, I think you're answering the question of, because like you said, it looks different. Self love and um, increasing your self worth is an internal process that's unique to all of us. And you just shared what worked for you, and there's a lot of similarities in terms of what worked for me. Like therapy was so helpful, and we're a huge proponent of on this show. And I love what you said of just like, I am my home. You know, like we spend every minute of every day with ourselves, and so you
Yes.
have to look, internal first. Did you have a question? I'm pretty good at gathering when you have a question. I think I heard it.
Yeah, like sniffle or like sigh
Yeah.
or something. Yeah, well, I kind of have a quick one and then another one that kind of segues away from, well, related. But one thing I want to make sure that doesn't get lost in translation is when you said your depression, you were feeling physical pain. Most people, when you talk, well, I would think generally when we think depression, we don't think physical.
Yeah.
Can you describe that physical pain, like what you felt, where you felt it, to just be able to connect the physical to the mental?
Yeah, it's hard to explain because I think I did have a mix of like anxiety going on at the same time, which I think a lot of people will say they can physically feel. Like either people usually feel anxiety like in their throat or like the pit of their stomach. Like it's a very tangible feeling that you can feel when you're anxious. Um, for me, like I just remember waking up and like not, I just feeling weak, like feeling like I couldn't eat, like feeling like I started, I'm not gonna like sit here and act like I'm perfect. It's not like I went through all of, these terrible feelings of anxiety and depression from, my partner cheating on me and losing my dad. And then I was like, gotta go to therapy. I got this. Like, no, I wanted to numb it. Like, I was experiencing so much pain in my stomach. I didn't want to eat, like my throat, my chest. Like, at times I felt like I couldn't breathe. And in the beginning of going through those feelings, the only thing that helped me was like numbing all of that. And so I started like drinking to get through it. And like I remember it would be like 12 o'clock on a Tuesday, and I would just be like, well, I'm having a glass of wine. And then it would just never end until I went to sleep. And then at the time I was in my grad program, I would show up with like a cup of wine and like hope that no one knew. And I'm sure some people did, but I I guess I bring in that point because like I understand how anxiety and depression can feed people wanting to like numb themselves and run from it. And that's how like substance abuse can start to take place because it's a feeling that people don't want to feel. It's really painful.
Well, what's interesting is like how easily you can mask a problem with what's socially accepted. If I sat with somebody in class and they were drinking a glass of wine in the middle of the afternoon, I'd be like, "Oh, this person's a party animal." Like something's totally
Yeah.
socially normal. Whereas like behind the scenes, like this person's actually suffering.
Well,
Whereas if a person's in there meditating, you look at them like, oh, that person's not normal at all. When in reality, that's a very healthy thing to do. You were gonna say something. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I think it's all contextual, obviously. So, if someone's like having a glass of wine in class and you're like, oh, that's like unusual for them, but like whatever, fuck it, cool, they're fun, versus someone who is like fighting a battle of like grief or dealing with like a breakup or whatever the case is, and you see someone like coming to class every day with like a glass of wine, it's pretty obvious that they're struggling with their feelings.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is contextual and relative to each situation. There are so many different parts of your life that I'm like so intrigued by. I want to take it to the part the day. Take us to the day you find out you're pregnant. What is kind of running through your head? How are you feeling? Just talk us through that experience a little bit.
This was like this whole like all of this was like some of like the darkest times of my life because I fell in love with my son's father, and I didn't know that he had a drug addiction until like 6 months into our relationship because people who have drug addictions get really good at hiding things. Um, because they know that the other person would not like that would not be acceptable. And so, yeah, we would like smoke weed together and like drink and things like that. Like most high school kids would do those things, and I just thought it was like normal. And I just realized that it got to a point where he started like going off to the bathroom for long periods of time, or like he would just get really agitated and irritable, like very often. And I realized that he had a drug problem. And after like confronting him and seeing it with my own eyes, I found out like how bad it was. Prior to us even being together, apparently he had been in rehab. Not a great way to start a relationship off, right? He's already hasn't been honest with me about the fact that he like has a problem. So, but yeah, so I was already really struggling in my relationship with him, and I was actually getting ready to break up with him. It was my senior prom, and we went, and I was dealing with like a lot of like physical abuse from him. Like it was just getting really bad. I just think like the drugs and the anger, and like he just became a monster and started getting like really physical with me, and I was just like over the relationship at that point, and I just was trying to like get out of it. I remember being at my prom night, and he had like stole $20 from my friend's purse and someone saw him do it, and like I confronted him, and that did not go well. And so I remember just being like, and he stole my iPod. Back then we had like the little square iPods.
Yep.
He stole my iPod, and I always knew it was him who had stole it, but like I never had confirmation on that until later when I found out he'd like sold it for drugs. But anyways, I broke up with him, and that next morning I was like throwing up, and I was really like confused about why I was throwing up and so sick, because like I maybe had like one drink or something. I was like, I didn't like stay out and get drunk. Like I had just gone through a breakup. I was upset. I like went home. And so I took a pregnancy test, and that following Monday, just to like be done with him. Like I was like, I want him out of my life. And ended up finding out that I was pregnant like in the school bathroom during lunch break. And I just like fell to my knees and just like cried on the ground, and then I got the fuck up and went to my sixth period class. Like that's how it went. It wasn't like it was not a joyful, happy moment. It was like full of fear and anxiety, and like, what am I gonna do next? Like I have just ruined my life. I'm like pregnant with this person who's addicted to drugs and like not the best human, and like what do I do? And I spent the next few weeks just like looking up like abortions and trying to figure out, just trying to listen to people's stories. And like the only conclusion that I could come to was like I might regret it if I get an abortion, but I'll never regret keeping him. So here we are.
Well, before you go, MD, I just want to acknowledge your vulnerability and thank you for sharing that, because I could tell it's not easy to talk about that stuff and to go back to that day. So I really appreciate you going there for us and for our listeners, because I'm
Thanks.
sure there's some people out there that can relate to that and to that feeling. And so I'm sure that, if anyone's out there listening, they now feel heard and seen.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I echo all of that. I'm always amazed by the courage and the strength of our guests. And just to revisit what you've alluded to as a really dark time. So that's a dark time in your life, but working through that now, you have your son. What we've done often in our conversations is we've looked back and tried to reflect on like what are the positives? Like how has that served you now? Like how have you grown? What have you learned through that experience of your decision ultimately to keep and then raise who is now a 12-year-old son?
Yeah. I'll tell you this. I used to really struggle because I like wanted him to show up and like be a dad and like come around, and he just like never would. And I used to like envy him so much because I used to feel like my childhood, like I guess like the end of my childhood into my 20s was like taken from me. I used to feel that way, and I used to feel like how does he get to go out and like party and just like live life and like have no responsibility, and I'm just like 19 and on food stamps and raising a kid alone. Like it was just the darkest time ever. And here we are. It's been, I mean, my son's now almost 12, and like none of that stuff ever mattered. Like partying doesn't matter. Like what does that even mean? Like, oh, I didn't get to experience my early 20s. Like what the fuck does that even mean? Like I have this wonderful, beautiful human that I have raised and is such an amazing little boy. Like I would give nothing for that. I would trade nothing for that, you know? And at this point in my life, like I'm able to see like, the dividends that come from being a good person and like showing up and like taking care of your people, and, like taking care of your child, like my son and I have like such a deep, close relationship, and I just couldn't imagine having ever not showing up and been, an incredible parent for him. And so, yeah, so I've obviously there's that, and there's like learning of, like relationships and, checking in on red flags, like before getting into like a relationship with someone, like paying attention to those things, because obviously I put myself in a relationship with a man who was struggling with drugs and and ended up becoming like very abusive. Obviously I didn't know any of that, but there are like flashes and moments when you're dating someone where you see pieces of who someone is, and I just don't think that my like radar was like radaring, because I grew up with like my father, the way that my father was, and maybe I had this mentality that I could fix him. I know I did. I know I had that mentality, like we'll get through this. Like I watched my mom stay in a relationship with an alcoholic like my whole life. And so I think the biggest thing that I've learned from all of this is that like I'm in control of my life and I get to choose how I live it. And, every little choice that we make does add up to the life that we end up having and the person that we end up being. So,
I
and
just
I'm
love that.
proud.
I love, yeah, you should be proud. I was fist pumping over here as you say that. I think it's such a powerful thing to, like, I'm in control of my life and I control
Yeah.
what happens. There is stuff obviously out of our control, but we control how we react to the things out of our control. Um, on that topic, I think you've mentioned in a post, or kind of on that topic, but you mentioned feeling guilt for not being able to provide your son with a two-parent household.
Yeah.
And I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that feeling of guilt, what comes with it, where it's stemming from, etc.
Yeah. Well, I think the feeling of guilt is knowing that I do take responsibility in having a relationship with a person who, you know, wasn't loving me the way that I should have been loved, and staying in that relationship and then having unprotected sex. Um, I, as an adult, a mature, aware adult, educated adult, like I would never do that at this point in my life, but I also have to have grace with myself. I was like a child and I had a really troubled home, and I found someone and I wanted to be loved so badly by that person that I think I just kind of like dealt with dealt with what I was given, I mean, there's so many things that line up where I'm like, okay, yeah, that probably came from my childhood and that probably came from my childhood. But like now I'm just like I have to be easy on myself. So I guess the guilt that I feel is me taking some responsibility for knowing that I put myself in that situation. And the other piece of that guilt is I think as a parent, we carry so many emotions for our child. Like when my son's father died, I felt like I was grieving for my son because he couldn't even understand the capacity of it. He couldn't even understand like, so I think that we just tend to hold like, I don't, it's almost like as a parent, what your child's going to struggle with. And so you carry that and you feel that. And I just feel like he is probably going to spend a lot of time as a grown man, as an adult, wondering why he wasn't good enough. And I hope that that's not what he feels. It's one of my biggest fears. But that feeling, knowing that my son is going to potentially feel that way, it kills me, you know? And like, obviously, a parent choosing to like not show up is not in anyone else's control but that parent. And it's not a reflection of like whether you're worthy of love or good enough. And I know that because I've had to do that work with my own father. But I just hate that my son now has to experience a fatherlessness in the way that I did. And I kind of feel like I wish I could have given him a better situation, you know?
Well, I'll just say, I think in just hearing some of your story, I don't know you as as well as I'd like, but it sounds like your son has a hell of a leader to look up to, and he has a blueprint because of somebody like you and your experiences. I think he's got someone who chose to take on that responsibility, and I think he's probably better for it. And I think, for what my thoughts and my opinion's worth, the best thing a leader can do is to take care of themselves, to work on themselves, and to show up every day and continue to do the work on themselves that you've been alluding to. So there was a piece of content that jumped out on your page to me was the quote, something along the lines of, "It's a game changer for a woman when she is willing to lose anyone, but no longer willing to lose herself." And
Ooh.
yeah, right. I know. I got chills.
Yeah.
I got chills narrating it in my voice, which
I
is
like that.
yeah. And I think that's so important because we just talked about how important you are in being that role model, that leader to your son, in a way to maybe even combat a lot of what you're fearing, right? And all connecting back to like you're in total control here, right? The thing that you fear the most, you're that fear's number one enemy in the way that you're leading. And so, just curious, your relationship to that quote. How do you elaborate in your own personal view of like, what's your relationship to understanding your willingness to lose anyone except yourself at this point in your life?
Yeah, I think like with all of the context of a lot of like what I shared, and I know we weren't able to get into depth with all of that, but I think just being in a place where I've been so low, like I mean, I've been to that place where like I'm like I don't even want to be alive. Like I've been through like really hard times, and I think when you work so hard on something, like you why would I let anyone get in the way of that? Like, I feel like I've just come so far, whether it's like a friend or a partner. I mean, I've had plenty of like experiences with friends and partners where it's like I'm living, I realize this about myself. This is the first time in my life where I'm like, wow, like I'm at peace. Like, this is the most peaceful time I've ever experienced in my life. Like I don't have parents like bickering and fighting. So I went from that to then like being in a super abusive, like toxic relationship with a drug addict that I was like trying to get to love me. And you can never, you can't fix those things. And then I was struggling to get through college, and I was like, for so long, I was like on food stamps and, like, and then I was in my master's program. Like, I struggled so hard to just even get my master's. And it's like, now I'm in a place where it's like, I am not struggling with school. I'm not struggling with money. I don't, like, I have created just in the same way that, like, I am my own home. Like, I have created my own safe space that I never got to have before. And, like, I'm not willing to let anyone fuck that up or get in the way of my son's peace. In a lot of ways, like I've provided something for him that I never had as a child. And that feels really fucking good to me and really redeeming, to be able to provide like a peaceful home for him. Nothing is worth that. Like I'm at a point in my life where I don't need validation from anyone. I really don't, except for myself. Like there are times I let myself down. And so the relationship with myself is the biggest one that I'm working on these days, and obviously my son as well. But yeah, nothing's worth getting in the middle of any of that.
So I gotta say, Melissa, I haven't said this often on the show, but like I am truly inspired sitting here right now, and I have not said that much, if at all. So just thank you for who you are as a person. Thank you for showing up every day with just an incredible amount of strength and love. It is shining through. I know we're thousands of miles away, but I wish I could just give you a big hug right now. Um,
Can I
how is
say
your?
something really
Yeah,
quick before?
yeah.
I also want to like thank you guys because I've been really struggling. Like right now, my full-time job is social media and content creation, and like it's been a dream, but along with it, I've really been struggling lately with like a lot of like bullying, and it's been mostly from men. And I think I've I was like so nervous to do this podcast because like I don't generalize. I don't think all men are assholes. Like obviously I haven't had the greatest experience with most men in my life, but I know that there are good men out there, and I really want to say thank you for holding a space for me and being so validating because I honestly have started to get to a point where I'm just like, "Oh my God, like men hate single moms." That's how I am like starting to I've just experienced so much like bullying and hate. Obviously, there's so much love, and I get it, it's easy to focus on the hate, but it's hard when you're hearing the same stuff over and over again, and it's like all 95% coming from men. So it's just like so wonderful to have like a little bit of like validation, and instead of someone like blaming me for being a single parent, it's like people are projecting, and I get it. But anyways, thank you. I just want to say
Yeah,
that.
no, thank you for the. We as men in general have a long way to go, but I really appreciate the kind words, and I really appreciate you just sharing what you've shared with us. You're gonna help and inspire a lot of people. Like I said, you inspired me just now. So with that, like you mentioned your son, like talk about your relationship with your son. Like how has it evolved over time? Where's it at
Yeah.
now? Where was it before?
Well, I think,
And I see
now.
a smile just came on your face the second you started to answer that question.
Yeah, well, that's like, that boy is like my heart, like he just is. Like even when I'm feeling anxious or down, when I'm around him, I just feel better. I feel home. It's like the home that I've been able to create for us that just I guess I didn't have, and it's just really healing. But our relationship, we have like a very open, fun relationship. Like my parenting mentality is very much like I am a mentor. And I want to be friends with him with boundaries, of course. Like I see my parenting as like mentor. So it's like I'm always trying to guide him and like lead him in the right directions. If he's out of line, I'm gonna let him know. But I'm not in this like authoritative, like majorly like crack the whip kind of a parenting style. Um, and I think that has actually allowed us to just be closer and like laugh at things and have fun together. Like I know that there's a lot of like parenting dynamics where kids just can't relate or feel connected to their parents because it's very like I'm right, you're wrong, and that's that. So I really try to like have an open dialogue often. We talk a lot about feelings. Like I'm constant one of the biggest tips that I have as a parent for staying connected and close with your child is doing check-ins. I mean, I do check-ins very often with him. Like check-ins about different things, like check-in about school, check-in about friends, like talk openly about like friends and stuff and emotions. Like that's the biggest thing is, you guys are doing so much great work opening up the conversation for men to start really like feeling their feelings and like not being ashamed of that. And that is one of the biggest things that I want to teach my son. So I'm always like, not always, obviously, I want there to be time in between. So maybe like every week or two, it's like, hey, how's it going? Like, how's school going? Sometimes I'll joke about it and be like, what's the 411? Just to like keep it light. Sometimes he'll talk with me, and sometimes he doesn't want to, and that's fine. I respect that as well. But yeah, I think just our relationship has definitely evolved. It's definitely at a point now where he's a preteen, and I feel a little bit disconnected from him, just because that it is a phase of parenting. Like, he's no longer my like baby, like he doesn't want me to kiss him, he doesn't want like the other day I was dropping him off, and there was like four like eighth graders. You could tell they were like the like older kids in school, and I like pull up and I'm like, okay, Adrian, like, love you. And we always like hug each other, but there, I could tell he was like, okay, I gotta go, like, bye, because there was like four like hot chicks like standing there, and so like our relationship has evolved a little bit. Like, he'll be like he'll talk to me like, oh, I haven't had my first kiss yet, and I'll be like, well, that's great, like, do you want it to be special? Like, I try to like I try not to like shame him, and just have like open dialogue. Obviously, if he was ever doing anything wrong, like, that's a different story, but I try to just be open and friendly. And I don't know, I wish I had that, I guess, as a kid. More of like a
Yeah.
mentorship type of parenting.
Yeah, you're emotionally there for him, but at the same time, like you said, you wish you would have had it. But your past also shaped like who you become today. If you had that, things would have been totally, like I feel like, and I don't say that just for you, but for everyone, everything happens the way it's supposed to be, because we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation, you or I, if for not everything that's happened. That's the way I've at least.
I believe that. I
Yeah.
believe that too. Yeah, I believe that.
Yeah, because I mean, at the very least, you know what you don't want the home to feel like, and that's sounds like
Just
how you feel.
suffocating and negative and like,
Yeah, you're like, I don't maybe I don't have it all figured out, but I know what I don't want this to be.
yeah,
And that's where I
100%.
think I think that's where your leadership can come from naturally. I'm wondering because you mentioned it earlier. Um, there was a fear, with what you were building for your son.
Yeah.
Um, did you ever find, and like as he's grown older and he's come to understand his life, and his family dynamic far out of his control, right? Was there a period as to which you were, and this is just curiosity, as to which you were
Yeah.
maybe seeking a forgiveness from him or some sort of validation from him of like, okay, maybe it wasn't this ideal picture to start with, but like, did I earn the right amount of love? And did that have anything to do with like you finding ways to forgive yourself and the guilt that you've felt from? And again, I don't think you should be guilty for any of it, right? But like
Yeah.
some of the guilt that you had to work through, did you find that maybe reflecting on like trying to seek that from your son?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a really interesting question. And I'm just trying to think of the best way to answer it. I think it's natural for humans to want to seek validation in general. Like, I genuinely think all parents want to hear from their kids, like, yeah, you're like a great parent and you're doing great and I love you. I mean, not that kids don't do that, you know. But yeah, I would be lying if I said that I've never experienced that feeling of wanting to be like, so how's it going? Like, how's your childhood? Is it okay? Like, I think, and I when having conversations with Adrian, which we're starting to have more and more in depth and in detail about, his past and his dad, and like things that kind of happened when he was younger that maybe he didn't really understand, and like having more of those open questions. And I have asked Adrian, like, I have been like, you know, like, do you think I'm a good mom? I think we all, as parents, like, ask ourselves that, even though, like, I know I'm a good mom. It's like you just want that validation. And like, he'll look at me and just be like, that's a really stupid question, like, duh, and you're like, okay, all right, like, I'm good. But yeah, no, I'd be lying if I said I've never like wanted validation from him that I'm like doing great at, in a way to like redeem everything that I feel that he's had to go through. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I
Or
asked
like,
that. I asked that. Oh, go ahead.
oh, I was gonna say, or like, what's the term for it? Oh, like compensating. Like, I do think that there was a while where I felt like I had to compensate, where I would just be like, okay, like let's go to Disneyland or let's do this, you know? And it's like these little things that you think make you a better parent don't necessarily make you a better parent at all. You might be providing, some experience, but I don't know, I think that some parents do tend to like overcompensate when they have those feelings. And I'm aware enough to know that being a good parent is just quite literally being physically and emotionally there for your kid and like obviously providing the necessities, but like think material goods and experiences aren't what's going to make you a good parent.
Yeah, it's like his bar was low for what a great parent would be, much lower than what you were trying to compensate for. And that's where my question comes from, is more curiosity, is like, did you have to learn over time through his life how to ultimately forgive yourself? And like you said, giving yourself grace from, being a child is how you put it.
Yeah, and I think like the older I've gotten, the more I've realized I'm like, oh, actually, like a lot of people are like getting divorced and like, I'm like, oh, like a lot of like we put these like expectations and like pressure on ourselves to like be the perfect family and like have the nuclear family and like own a home and be married and like all these things that just like aren't really attainable, to be honest, for most people. And then a lot of people, like divorce rates are so high, it's like I've noticed a lot of Adrian's friends have single moms as well, or have like two dads instead of a mom and a dad. Like families are just different. And I think one of the ways that I've also been able to like forgive myself is, my mom made a comment to me. She's made a few comments that have like really helped to heal me. She said, one of them, she said like, "Oh gosh, like, you and Adrian travel so much. Like you've taken him like so many places and you guys spend so much time together, like so much more than I was ever able to give you." And it made me realize I was like, I might not have been in a position, I, like my son might not have a father, but he has a damn good mom. And I am someone who's taking him on really good experiences and like giving him like providing a lot of value for him in his life. It's like, how do you measure up having a good childhood? There's so many factors in it. You can have two parents who were miserable like mine were,
Hmm.
and we have this conversation all the time because like he did say to me one time, he was like, well, at least you had a dad. And I was like, your feelings are so valid. Like the way that you feel is so valid. But I hope you also understand that like I really like my dad was physically there, but like I really didn't have a dad, And it's like the experiences that my son has been given has been far more than what I was given as a child. And I think that that's just helped me heal is like, no family's perfect. Not every kid's gonna get everything that they want and need. And honestly, I think the biggest thing that I have learned is that struggles and hardships create, a resilient human. And I am resilient. I know I am. I mean, like the research shows that like becoming like being a teen mom in high school and getting your master's degree is like not heard of. Like that doesn't happen. And for me, it's almost like, well, I wasn't able to give him everything I wanted to give him, but at least there's going to be like pieces of like resilience that will come from this, like sort of like a silver lining thing. And also, some of Adrian's friends have it all and they're spoiled little brats.
I could have just listened for you talk for another 15 minutes about all of like the good things that you are. I would have just stayed off the microphone and let you continue. Just go on and on and on. Because
My problem is I probably would have.
it's all
Just
very
because I,
yeah, it's very true, and I'm just happy you're at a place where you recognize all those things,
thanks.
and you celebrate them as you should.
Quick 2 cents. Just I thought your response to your son after that comment was like really empathetic, and like that type of empathy is I think what breaks the cycle. Whereas if you responded with more spite, right, and it just
Right.
continues this loop where he doesn't understand from leadership what empathy is in that moment. So your response actually like wowed me because I don't know how many parents, how many leaders, mentors are responding as adequately.
Yeah, I just really quickly wanted to say something I've learned like recently is, if someone's expressing that they're in pain, I think a lot of people in our society are so like are on the defense, like, oh, well, I've experienced that too. Or like, oh, well, I've experienced, like, if you're talking about your breakup, someone's like, oh, well, I know what that feels like. And it's almost like be creates this like echo chamber of like no one listening to like actually listening to each other and just trying to like get their own word in. And I heard this quote one time, it was something about like the pain Olympics, like no, you don't get an award for experiencing any more trauma or any more pain. You don't. So like be a good human, and when someone's like struggling and like voicing that, it doesn't take away from like your own experiences to literally just shut the fuck up and listen to them, you know?
Yeah, that's empathy, you know, at like to a T, um, which is unfortunately difficult for a lot of people. Like it's so natural to be in this like place where someone's talking, instead of actually just like fully being present and listening to the individual. We're in our heads about what we want to say next. So because, oh, I don't want there to be an awkward silence, and normally when you're in your head about what to say next, it's, well, how can I relate to this person, instead of listening to the individual of like, what are they actually telling me? Like, they're telling me that they're hurting right now, and how can I be there for them? Like, you don't have to say like, I understand. You say, that's valid, I'm here for you. Like, sometimes that's all you can say. And
Yeah.
if the person needs you, they know they've got someone. um, you mentioned this community. Like, I'm curious if there's a community, if you found a community of like single mothers. You mentioned like you've seen others at school. If you've been able to build a community, if you will, maybe that's through your social media page, and kind of share those experiences together. Like, I'm just curious what it's like from that lens.
Yeah, I think I really did struggle with that because having my son so early, it was like all of my like previous friends that I had were up, they weren't parents and they all like went off to college. And so it was like, cool, I'm like gonna stay here and go to community college so I can have some support and help these first couple years. So I felt really lonely. I mean, I remember my first semester of college, like walking down the hallway and like I was so pregnant, I was about to like give birth. I actually had my son during winter break and then went back like a week and a half, 2 weeks
Oh my
later. Like
gosh.
crazy the timing of like how it all worked. But I remember like walking and like these guys were like, oh, like they like some guy said to me like, oh, she's like pretty, and then the other one started laughing and they were like, she's so fucking pregnant. Do you see that? You know, and it was like, so I really struggled with that. I would say like honestly until I transferred into Cal State Long Beach, and then the Cal State Long Beach actually gave me like a full scholarship for Adrian to go to a daycare, so like I could go to school and work. Like he was literally there from like 9 to like 5. It was amazing. So I was able to get all my homework done and all that, but I was also able to just like be like have kind of like a normal college life and like go to a coffee shop with a friend and like hang out. But none of them were ever like parents. So it felt very isolating because it was like if I wanted to hang with friends, I felt like it was very like I couldn't be a mom. Like I remember my brother one year for Christmas got me a sticker that said like, you know, the like baby, like careful, there's a baby in here, whatever. He like put it like in my stocking, and I remember being like, I'm not putting this on my car. Because there were points where like I was kind of running from the identity of being a mom. Like I was always a great mom and I always loved my son, but like I struggled disclosing that to people on dates or if I was making friends or anything because I thought that they would judge me. And I really, unfortunately, I don't feel like I ever really found a group of mom friends until like a few years ago when, you know, slowly over time, Adrian's friends, you know, we would talk with the parents, and then all of a sudden I started having like wine nights with some of like the moms and stuff like that. And so I just kind of grew closer to them that way. But I really don't think I ever had like a community. And I think speeding up to now today, I have a lot of single moms who follow me. I think it's a huge part of my demographic because it's a lot of the content that I share. Um, and yeah, I mean, I try to connect with women as much as possible. It's obviously hard and it's through a screen, so it's not the same, but I do feel like I do have a pretty like large community of like single moms and single dads. Like I've got like a handful of like single dads that follow me too. So, and that I've like connected, it's not just like following, just like connecting with, you know, I've
Yeah,
had
yeah.
a lot of like conversations in my DMs and like stuff like that. So,
I have one more question for you before we get into our rapid fire questions. And
Okay.
it's pretty broad, but it's how do you want to be remembered?
Um, I want people to have felt safe with me. That's how I want to be remembered.
That's simple and so beautiful. And I think I asked you that question because I had a journal prompt and like a guided journal, and it asked me the same question. And my answer was I want people to have felt seen, heard, and understood around me, which
Which I
is
think is very
so
similar.
similar to I want, yeah, to a safe space. Um,
Yeah.
MD, how do you want to be remembered?
I saw that coming. I was starting to already think of my answer. Give me the end of the rapid fire, and
All right.
let me be thoughtful of my answer.
Fine. Okay, so three questions for you before we wrap up. And MD tells us how he wants to be remembered. The first question is, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given, or just a favorite quote? And it can be your own quote because that quote is one of my favorite.
I actually I feel like one of the best quotes that I've heard was like you are, and it's so simple again. Gosh, there's a couple of them. One of them is that like you are allowed to tell your own story even if it involves others, because I struggled so long with this, like ever even talking about my situation or my story, because there are other people involved, and it's crazy like where it's gotten me in my life with like my platform, but also from what I've heard from other people, just like really inspired them and like given them hope about their life. And like, I'm sure that there are like young single moms watching my story, like, oh, she seems fine. Like, she probably has financial help or probably has this or that. But like, no, it took me so fucking long to get to like where I am now. And so anyways, I think just being able to share my story can like help people who are in the same place. Another like piece of advice that I feel like really stuck with me, and this actually doesn't pertain to parenting, but more so dating, is like stop creating ideas about people and just like let them be who they are and accept them for who they are, or don't accept them. Say like, okay, like I'm watching this pattern. This is how this person treats me. This is how this person loves me. I either accept this or I don't. And I feel like that has like simplified my dating and like relationship life in such a positive way.
Those are two very, very good quotes slash advice. Second question: if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
My dad.
That was great.
I yeah, when my dad died, I dreamt of him for like 6 months, and he would come talk to me and we would spend time together, and I just like it's been like 5.5 years, and he just like stopped coming back, and I would just love to ask him like how it was. Like, was it painful? Are you okay? Like, are we all like going to the same place? Like it would probably give me a lot of ease in my life about dying and all of, because that's a whole other thing. But I would love to chat with my dad
Yeah,
just to get some reassurance.
that's a beautiful answer, and that was the quickest answer anyone's ever given. It was like that. The last question is just, what do you like to do in your free time? What are your hobbies?
Ooh, okay. Hiking, camping. I love like arts and crafts. Like for years, I would use art to like express myself. Like when my son's father passed away, I was just going through such a hard time. I would just literally for hours, I would just blast music and just like, paint. And so yeah, I love anything like crafty or active. I love hot yoga. I love being at the beach, anything like that.
Hot yoga, man. Some of I work out a lot, and hot yoga, I've never sweat so much in my life.
It is a mental challenge. The
Oh,
heat, the heat alone, like there are times where I'll be like, I feel like I'm suffocating.
it's the only class, like I'll do hit classes, and like they're very hard, but it's the only class I've done where I'm like counting down the minutes until it's over. Like
Yeah.
that, it's just like I need this to be done. But I did not forget before we wrap up the answer to
I
that
got my
question.
answer. Yeah. How I would want to be remembered. I would say not so much a good leader, but a leadership of good. I think there's a lot of good in the world, but there's also just a lot of bad in the world. If you just turn on the TV and watch the news.
Yeah.
And, I just, for any path I cross, for anybody who spends some time with me and I have any sort of impact on them, I would hope that in the context of remembering me, assuming that I'm gone, when presented with the option to do something good or bad, that they choose good because I had a degree of influence on that decision. So just, yeah, I would say that.
Very nice answer. All right, without thank you so much, Melissa, for coming on here, sharing your incredible story, and just being so open, and really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you guys. I appreciate you.